"Give me something to eat," the boy said, standing at the edge of the table with his hands at his sides and cracked sneakers on the heated marble floor. "And I'll help your son walk again." Desmond Ford set down his sparkling water very slowly. The Pinnacle Club's dining room on the 42nd floor of the Harbor Center was doing what it always did at noon on a Wednesday, containing the particular choreography of Vancouver's moneyed class at lunch, the real estate deals dressed in the language of civic legacy, the hedge fund managers performing magnanimity over halibut and Okanagan Riesling. Desmond had been attending this lunch in various forms for 25 years. He knew the room the way you know a room you have always controlled. He did not know what to do with the boy, standing beside his table. The boy was perhaps 11, perhaps 12, thin in the manner of children for whom meals are uncertain things. His jacket was navy blue and fraying at the cuffs. His sneakers had been repaired with packing tape at the left toe. He stood at the precise edge of their table with an absolute composure that had no business being on a face that young. Dark eyes, steady. Not frightened, not begging, not performing anything. Waiting. Desmond scanned the room for a camera crew, for the particular grin of someone running a prank. He found nothing except the discreet panic of the maître, moving between tables too quickly. "Pardon me," Desmond said. It was the voice he used in boardrooms when a junior partner had said something catastrophically wrong and needed to understand that without being told directly. "What did you just say to me?" "I said I'll help your son walk again." The boy glanced at Lucas, who sat in his wheelchair beside the table, and then looked back at Desmond without embarrassment or apology. "But I need to eat first. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning." Across the table, Desmond's business partner set down his fork and developed a sudden interest in the view of Burrard Inlet through the floor-to-ceiling windows. This was the move of a man who had survived 30 years in Vancouver commercial real estate by understanding which moments required his invisibility. Lucas was 10 years old and had been in a wheelchair for 3 years, ever since a rare inflammatory condition had slowly, implacably taken the use of his legs, while every specialist from Vancouver General to the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto watched and measured and corresponded apologetically. He had his mother's eyes, dark and patient, and he used them now to look at this boy with the same careful attention he gave to most things in the world, quietly, without agenda, taking it all in. He had asked Desmond once, 6 months after the diagnosis, whether he thought he would ever play hockey again. Desmond had said what he always said, that the best people in the world were working on it, that the research program at UBC was promising, that money had solved harder problems than this one. Lucas had nodded politely and looked out the window, and something in his expression in that moment had stayed with Desmond in the private hours, a thing he could not manage or address or fund his way past. "Security," Desmond said now. 2 men arrived from different directions with the practiced speed of people trained to make disruption disappear without seeing. The boy didn't resist. He let them take hold of his arms with a calm that was somehow more unsettling than protest would have been. As they walked him back toward the entrance, he turned his head and looked at Lucas one more time. "Give it a few minutes," he said simply. "Just a few minutes." Desmond straightened his tie. He returned to his water. Across from him, his partner quietly picked up his fork again. "Lucas," Desmond said, "where were we?" "The Surrey corridor." "Dad." His son's voice was different, low, careful, as though he were testing the sound of something new. "My legs feel warm." The water glass went back down. It was a psychological response. The boy had planted a suggestion in a child who wanted desperately for something to be true, and the mind was a powerful instrument, and Desmond had read the literature on psychosomatic phenomena, and he knew exactly what this was. He knew it with the certainty of a man who had paid for certainty and received it from people with credentials that hung on the walls of institutions in 4 countries. Lucas's right foot lifted from the wheelchair's footrest, just slightly, just a few inches, and then it set back down, deliberately, voluntarily. Desmond was out of his chair before he understood that he had stood up. They caught the boy half a block from the hotel in the rain that had started while they were inside. Desmond pushed the wheelchair himself through the revolving doors and across Georgia Street, ignoring the light, ignoring the horns, because there was a small navy jacket disappearing down the block, and something in his chest was behaving in a way it had not behaved in a very long time. "Milo," Lucas called, "wait." The boy turned. He stood in the rain with water running down his face and looked at them both, and his expression was patient and a little tired, the way someone looks when they have been carrying something for longer than they should have had to. "His legs," Desmond said. He was breathing harder than the distance warranted. He felt something. Movement. "I know," the boy said. "How? What did you do? What are you?" Desmond heard the edge in his own voice and forced it down. He was a man who understood leverage, who had built an empire on understanding exactly how much of it he held at any given moment. He held none right now. "I didn't do anything to him," the boy said. His voice was patient. "I just reminded his body of what it already knows. Sometimes bodies forget." A cab rolled past and threw a sheet of water across the curb. None of them moved. "Come back with us," Desmond said. The word "please" came out before he waited. "Please, whatever you need. I have resources. Doctors, researchers." "No doctors," the boy said. "Then tell me what?" "I need to talk to my mum." The dark eyes appraised him. "Come to us tomorrow. I'll tell you where." He turned and walked away down Georgia Street, and this time Desmond did not follow. He stood on the sidewalk with his expensive suit soaking through in the April rain and watched the boy get smaller and then disappear around a corner. And he thought, for the first time in a very long time, that there were categories of things in the world that his money had failed to prepare him for. Lucas reached up and touched his father's hand. "He'll come back," the boy said. "I can tell." Desmond had not slept like an ordinary person in years. He slept the way men sleep who have run large things for a long time, in functional intervals, one part always running. That night, after Lucas had shown him 5 deliberate movements and fallen asleep with wonder written plainly on his face, Desmond sat in the kitchen of the Shaughnessy house and let the kettle boil without making anything. His assistant found the address by noon the following day. A transitional housing center on the east side, a converted building with a small common room that smelled of coffee and institutional goodwill, and the particular resilience of people who had been left with nothing except the ability to keep going. The woman at the front desk was not moved by the name Desmond Ford. She asked him to wait. He waited. When the boy's mother came through the back hallway, Desmond recognized her before he remembered where from. That specific delay, the face arriving before the context, was one of the stranger experiences of his life. She was in her mid-30s, composed in the manner of someone who had come to understand that composure is the one thing no one can repossess. She carried herself with the precision of someone who had worked in professional environments and had not allowed herself to forget it, even when those environments no longer applied. "Mr. Ford," she said, "my name is Kathleen Hatch. My son told me you'd come." "Mrs. Hatch," he extended his hand. After a moment she shook it. "I need to understand what your son is able to do." "What my son is able to do," she said, "is not a product. No heat in it. That made it land harder than anger would have." She did not invite him to sit. She did not offer him anything. She stood in that lobby and looked at him with steady brown eyes and waited for him to say the right thing or the wrong thing, entirely prepared for either. "I know," Desmond said, and then, because the habit of his entire professional life was to control the room and he had no control of this one, "I don't know what I'm doing. I came because my son moved his legs last night for the first time in 3 years. I came because I don't have anything else." Kathleen Hatch was quiet. "Milo has been like this since he was 4, she said at last. "The first time I noticed, he held his hand against a schoolmate's ear. The child had an infection, and 2 days later the fever was gone and no one could explain it. I thought it was coincidence." She paused. "It wasn't." "You never told anyone." "I told his father before he died." The word recalibrated the silence between them. "He worked for Forda Development," Kathleen said. "Site safety manager on the Granville East project, east of the city. He raised concerns about the load specifications on the 3rd wing for 7 months. He put them in writing. He went to the site supervisor, then to the district office. Then he sent everything to the municipal building authority. A breath. 3 weeks after the 3rd report, part of the east wing came down. He was on site. He was badly hurt. He lived long enough to..." She stopped, straightened. "He lived for 4 weeks. The common room of the shelter was very quiet. "I was working in your administrative division at the time," she continued. "When the insurance appeal failed, I tried to access the structural reports my husband had filed. I was dismissed for performance issues that no one was able to specify. I was given a reference letter that made it difficult to find comparable work in the industry. Milo was 4 years old." She looked at him without drama. "I don't tell you this for sympathy, Mr. Ford. I tell you so you understand why I'm not particularly eager to help you." Desmond had been in difficult rooms before. He had sat across from regulators and bereaved shareholders and investigative reporters and people who had lost livelihoods because of decisions made at his level or with his signature, or simply within the empire he had built and called good. He had always known what to say, or had known which quality of silence to hold while he determined what to say. He had nothing now. "I remember the Granville East review," he said. This was true. He remembered it as a matter of liability management, engineering assessments, an insurance process, a settlement his legal team had characterized as fair. He had not known the name of the man who had filed the safety reports. He had not known there was a man. "I didn't know the details of what happened to the workers on site." "I know you didn't," Kathleen said. "That's part of it." He looked at the laminate floor. Something was moving beneath the surface of what he had always called his understanding of himself. Something slow and uncomfortable and possibly necessary. "What would it take," he said, "for you to consider letting Milo help my son?" "You're doing it again," she said, not unkindly, asking what it costs. I don't know how else to ask." Milo appeared in the doorway behind his mother, still in the navy jacket. He looked at Desmond with that evaluating steadiness, and then at his mother. "He's different than he was yesterday," Milo said, simply as fact. Kathleen considered Desmond for a long moment. "Our term," she said. "No media, no doctors studying him, no testing, no cameras, no one we haven't approved. When Lucas is well, we're finished. We go back to our lives." "Yes. And I want the full incident file from the Granville East collapse. Everything your company holds. Not for legal purposes, I know the limitations, but because my son deserves to know what his father was trying to do. You'll have it by the end of the week." Kathleen nodded. "Milo, what do you think?" Milo looked at Desmond for one more moment, then he nodded too. 4 sessions, he said, maybe 5. He was right, as it turned out. Over the following 2.5 weeks, Milo came to the Shaughnessy house every second afternoon. He and Lucas would sit together in the sunroom, playing cards, talking in the easy, digressing way of children, sometimes Milo placing his hands on Lucas's knees with that same quiet focus, no ceremony, no theatrics, just a child being entirely still and intentional in a way that made Desmond hold his breath each time he watched from the doorway. By the end of the first week, Lucas could stand holding the back of a chair for 30 seconds. By the end of the second, he walked 11 unsteady, astonishing steps across the sunroom while Milo counted them aloud. Desmond stood in the doorway and could not speak. He tried, twice, to give Kathleen money. Both times she declined without argument. On the third attempt he stopped trying and instead called the head of his legal department and asked for a complete review of the Granville East settlement file. He called HR and asked for the termination record on Kathleen Hatch and held it in his hands in his study that evening and read it and did not enjoy reading it. He instructed his communications director to begin drafting a workplace safety reform announcement for the board, which he intended to proceed with regardless of their reception. They did not receive it warmly initially. He explained his reasoning in language they understood: liability reduction, workforce retention, reputational equity in a changing regulatory environment. All true. None of it the whole truth. One evening, after a dinner that had become a genuine ritual between them, Lucas looked across the kitchen table at his father and said, "Why doesn't Milo's mum like you very much?" Children ask the questions that adults have worked out how to avoid. Desmond set down his coffee and gave the question the honesty it deserved. "Because I made decisions that hurt her family," he said, "and I didn't see it because I wasn't paying attention to the right things." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Did you tell her you were sorry?" "Not the right way, not yet." "You should," Lucas said. "You always tell me that when I do something wrong, you say you have to say it out loud, not just think it." Desmond thought about this for a considerable time after his son went to bed. The next afternoon, before Milo arrived, he asked Kathleen if she would walk once around the block with him. She agreed, with the measured caution she extended to most things involving Desmond. They walked the quiet Shaughnessy Street with its old elms and heritage facades, and Desmond said what needed to be said without the language of liability or process or review. He said that her husband had tried to do the right thing, and that the organization he had built had made that very difficult, and then had made it more difficult still. He said he was sorry. He said it in a way that was not an offer and not a negotiation. Kathleen walked beside him without speaking for most of a block. Then she said, "It doesn't fix it." "I know. But it helps," she said a little, to hear it said plainly without a lawyer in the room. They walked back in a silence that was somewhat different from the one they had walked out in. Milo told him about the setback on a rainy Tuesday in late March. They were in the sunroom, and Kathleen had stepped out for tea, and Milo looked up from the card game with that calm, matter-of-fact expression he used for everything, and said, "His body's going to have a hard week soon, maybe starting in 10 days. His legs will feel heavy again. There'll be some pain." Desmond looked up from his laptop. "What do you mean?" "It's part of how it works. 2 steps forward, 1 step back." The boy returned his gaze to his cards. "The important thing is that you don't panic. Don't call anyone. Don't try to manage it. Just stay with him and keep him moving gently, even when it's difficult. That's when the healing is actually happening, in the hard part, not the easy part." "How do you know this?" Milo considered. "The same way you probably know when something's wrong with a deal before the numbers show it. It's just in me. I can feel where things are and where they're going." A small shrug. "I didn't choose it. It's just what I am." The setback arrived in exactly the window Milo had described. Lucas woke one morning with stiff, reluctant legs and the particular quiet behind his eyes that Desmond had not seen since the early days of the diagnosis. This time, Desmond did not reach for his phone. He did not call the specialists, did not mobilize the particular network of experts that had always been his answer to helplessness. He sat on the edge of his son's bed and said, "This is part of it, and Milo said it would pass, and we're going to trust that." Lucas looked at him with some surprise. "You trust Milo?" "I trust Milo. More than the doctors." "I trust different things now than I used to," Desmond said. "I'm still working out which ones." Lucas leaned against his father's shoulder, which he had not done in a long time. "Me too," he said quietly. The setback lasted 5 days. On the 6th morning, Lucas walked unaided to the bathroom and back, and when he appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face had the expression of someone who has survived something and knows it. A journalist found them in the first week of April. Her name was Claire Renaud, writing for the Vancouver Sun, and she had obtained surveillance photographs from the Pinnacle Club, and a neurologist on background who called Lucas's recovery medically unprecedented. She called Desmond's office with a list of questions that arrived in his stomach like cold water. He met her in person, in a quiet cafe on Granville. He told her about the trust he was establishing, the Hatch Ford Workplace Safety Foundation, which was still being named, and the policy reforms at Ford Development that would be announced publicly that quarter. He offered her real access to the company's internal restructuring, not managed access, genuine access, on the record. And he told her without ambiguity that a child was at the center of this story, and that the child's privacy was not something he was in any position to negotiate. Claire Renaud studied him from across the table. "The child's ability is the story. The story of what was done to her father is also a story," Desmond said. "It's a true one, it has public consequence, and it will change things for workers across this province if it's reported carefully." She published a 4-part series in June on the Granville East collapse, the buried safety reports, and the workplace reforms Ford Development was implementing. It ran with a great deal of attention. Milo's name appeared nowhere in it. On a Saturday in late April, when the cherry blossoms along West 16th were doing their brief, luminous work, Lucas ran for the first time. Not far, not with any particular elegance. A dozen steps across the back lawn while Milo sat on the porch steps with his arms folded and a small, unhurried smile on his face, as though he had always known this moment was coming and was simply glad to be present for it. Kathleen stood beside Desmond, a coffee in her hand, and neither of them said anything for a while because there was nothing adequate to say. Later, the four of them took the SkyTrain across town to Granville Island for lunch, real lunch, at an outdoor table by the water, the inlet sharp and blue in the April light. Lucas and Milo walked ahead on the seawall, talking with the total absorption of children who have found each other, their voices drifting back in fragments. Desmond noticed that Lucas walked close to Milo, not leaning on him, not dependent, just close, the way you walk beside something you have come to trust without quite deciding to. "He wants to play hockey next fall," Desmond said. "He'll play hockey next fall," Kathleen said, not hopeful, factual. Milo always sounds like that, like he already knows. He does, mostly. She watched her son point at something in the water, a great blue heron standing on one leg with that ancient, regal stillness. I used to find it frightening. Now it's just who he is. He came into the world with something extra, and I've stopped trying to name it. Desmond thought about what it would mean to stop trying to name something. For his entire adult life, naming and categorizing and controlling had been how he operated. He was beginning to see, slowly and without complete comfort, that there were more things requiring release than his model of the world had previously accounted for. "I'd like to establish a bursary for Milo," he said, "for university or for whatever he decides to do. No conditions attached." Kathleen was quiet for a moment. "Let me ask him." "Of course. He'll want to know it has nothing to do with what he can do for people. He's always been very clear that what he does isn't something he trades." "It won't be," Desmond said. "It'll be about his father and what his father tried to protect and what was taken from him." The heron lifted from the water's edge, with wide, slow wing beats rising over the inlet until it was smaller than a thought against the pale April sky. "All right," Kathleen said. "Then yes." On a Saturday in the second week of October, Desmond sat in the stands at the Killarney Community Rink and watched Lucas skate. The boy was not graceful about it. He was 10 years old and newly returned to his legs, and had everything still to learn about the mechanics of blades on ice. But he was out there in the noise and cold of a minor hockey practice, and every time he took a stride across the blue line, something in Desmond's chest did a quiet, private thing it would not have been capable of a year ago. 2 rows up, Milo was doing homework on a clipboard, occasionally glancing up to check on Lucas's progress before looking back down with the satisfied air of someone whose accounting has come out right. Kathleen sat beside Desmond with a Tim Hortons coffee warming both hands and her wool scarf pulled up against the rink cold. "He's going to fall," Milo said, not looking up from his work. A moment later, Lucas fell. He got up immediately, the way children do when they are not performing their recovery for anyone, and kept going. "He told me," Desmond said, "that he wants to start something. A group for kids who were sick and got better, so they can sit with kids who are still going through it. He said the doctors were kind, but they didn't actually know what it felt like from the inside." Kathleen looked at him. "That's his own idea." He said the idea came from something Milo told him, that the gift isn't the healing itself, it's what you build with the time after, what you do with the fact that you came through something. Kathleen looked at her son for a long moment, and her expression held something Desmond had not had a name for until recently. It was love that had survived everything that tried to hollow it out, love that had simply refused to be reduced, and had arrived finally at a kind of gratitude just by still being there. Out on the ice, Lucas attempted a turn and almost held it, wobbled, grinned, kept moving. The sound of blades against the ice surface was clean and continuous under the arena's lights. Outside, the October dusk was coming down fast over the North Shore Mountains, the way it does in Vancouver, quickly without ceremony, and the first lights of the city were appearing across the water like something slowly becoming readable. Desmond had spent 30 years building structures meant to outlast him. He understood now that the only ones with any real weight were the ones you couldn't see from the outside, the ones built out of what you admitted and what you changed and who you stayed for. On the ice, Lucas waved up at them without breaking stride. Desmond waved back.